Cé míle fáilte riamh, Donna Pockerbannach, and a very warm welcome to Embassy of Ireland's celebration of St. Brigid's Day 2021. My name is Ronan Gargan, the Ambassador of Ireland to Hungary, and I'm delighted to present this year's celebration. On Untitled Chapter, we celebrate the life of St. Brigid, and in doing so celebrate the creativity and contribution of women everywhere in the world. It is also a moment to resolve on this day to remember our shared commitment to equality and universal respect for rights, as we strive to build a more just world for everyone, male and female. This year, the Embassy of Ireland in Hungary is delighted to partner with the Contemporary Music Centre to present tonight's CMC Salon and CMC Spotlight in celebration of the creative talent of Irish and Hungarian women in contemporary music. This is the 4th anniversary of the Department of Foreign Affairs celebrations worldwide for St. Brigid's Day, and is the 2nd year that the Embassy of Ireland in Hungary has marked this special day. We begin this evening with a special CMC Salon for St. Brigid's Day, with performances of works by Irish and Hungarian composers, along with discussions about the music with the composers and the performers. In an amazing example of international collaboration and artistic spirit, the CMC has this evening facilitated new, creative partnerships between Irish and Hungarian artists in contemporary music. The Embassy is very happy that these strong creative connections will be celebrated further when we come to celebrate Bloomsday in June 2021, in partnership again with the CMC as well as with the Budapest Music Centre. But for now, it gives me great pleasure to pass on the musical baton to CMC Director Yvonne Ferguson for music and conversation for the next 45 minutes in the CMC St. Brigid's Day Salon.
A warm welcome to the CMC Salon, the first CMC Salon of 2021 on this, the first day of February, the feast day of St. Brigid, La Fela Brigid and Embarked. In Ireland, the 1st of February is the official beginning of spring, and we have the great pleasure of working with the Ambassador and the team at the Embassy of Ireland in Hungary to bring you this evening's Salon and Spotlight events to celebrate the creativity of women active in contemporary music, both in Ireland and in Hungary. And so, Jó estét to all our Hungarian friends in music. Our salon this evening features 2 new works for guitar from CMC emerging composer Anya Mallon and Hungarian composer Petra Sassi. Both works written in response to St. Brigid's Day and the first day of spring, written for and performed by guitarist Kathleen Kultai. Hello to Anya and to Kathleen, joining us from their homes in the UK, and Petra will join us a little bit later on as well to talk about her work. And we feature 3 movements from Gráinne Mulvey's seminal work for soprano and guitar, a Carlo song cycle, based on poetry by Derek Coyle and performed for us this evening by Elizabeth Hilliard, soprano, and Anselm MacDonald, guitar. A big hello to you, Gráinne, Elizabeth and Anselm, joining us from your homes across the island of Ireland. And I'm here in the cosy library of 19 Fishamble Street in central Dublin. Well, at this very challenging time across the world, this evening we'll hear music written and recorded during these very unusual times. And we'll hear from all our artists this evening on how they've risen to the challenges of working remotely. It's the first day of spring, and as we turn this corner of the year, new ideas, new directions, new horizons, and new music. And our first work this evening is a very new work. It's the world premiere of Anya Mallon's Solace in Bulk for solo guitar, commissioned by CMC as part of our CMC Emerging Composers Programme. Anya, this is a work that's a response to the day that's in it, the first day of spring, and in bulk, as our ancestors called it.
Yes, absolutely. So I was really fascinated when I found out there are sort of all of these passage tunes across Ireland. And of course, probably the most famous is Newgrange. But this particular one, the Mound of Hostages, which is located on the hill of Tara, is actually aligned with the sun, so that on the morning of Imbolc, the chamber within the passage tomb is filled with light, which illuminates lots of Neolithic carvings all along the walls of the tomb. And I thought that was such a unique and interesting concept. So I sort of tried to translate that into sound. And so that's what my piece is based on for guitar.
Kathleen, this work was written for you, and yourself and Anya got together remotely, of course, which is the only way at the moment, unfortunately. And this is your first work for guitar, if I'm right, Anya. So a very new experience for you. And we'll talk to Grania later as well about writing for guitar. Kathleen, this work, I know you were telling me that you found it very beautiful, and you're really happy to be learning it and to have worked with Anya. But the challenge of working remotely for the both of you over the last month or so in collaborating on this work, how has that been, Kathleen?
Well, I think it worked really well, to be honest. But I suppose it was really challenging for Anya, because I asked her to write this piece for not a standard classical guitar. So as a first work, she had to, well, actually, this is the very first piece written for a new guitar, which is the testing model is here. So I don't know if you can see that the fretboard is transformed, yes. And you have these small magnet cables, which can, if you see here, and so I put another one there. So this is a guitar prototype I've been working. This is a new guitar prototype I've been working on for, well, the magnet cable system I was working for more than several years now, but the prototype is brand new, and the concert model is not ready yet. I said this is like the pilot project for the moment, with these two new works that I am still testing the prototype, and Anya was really so dedicated to this project, and I think she understood very well what is this about, and she used the affordances of the new guitar extensively in her work. I felt we could really connect spiritually and musically very well through even Zoom, or maybe it was just the music that helped us to connect.
And Kathleen, I know you've spoken before about kind of idiomatic writing for the guitar, and how you're drawn to composers who think very much about writing for the instrument and the particulars of writing to the instrument. So just curious, Anya and Kathleen, the wonderful description you gave there of the hill at Tara, and how you're trying to create the images there and the light coming through on the 1st of February. Are there certain elements of guitar writing that we should listen out for when we hear the piece?
Well, yeah, I think one thing that I really tried to incorporate into the piece was this sense of expansiveness. So I used the capo system that Kathleen has developed to try and quite literally expand the pitch as the piece continues. So this sort of pitch range starts off smaller, and there are sort of chord structures throughout the piece that expand and grow to sort of represent the light coming into the chamber.
Fantastic. We'll speak a little bit more about it, but for now, let's hear this very, very new work from Anya Mallon, Solace in Bulk, on this new guitar developed by Kathleen Kiltye, and this work performed by Kathleen. Anya Mallon's Solace in Bulk, performed on guitar by Kathleen Coltai. And really interesting to hear about the development of the new guitar, Kathleen, and this first work for the guitar, which we're really privileged to have on the CMC Salon this evening on the Feast of St. Brigid. And great to hear about how successful it was to work remotely, and that you didn't feel inhibited by that. And Anya, there was something else just that I wanted to touch on, which is this wonderful image you have of the light and the hill of Tara. And you've also commissioned an artist to draw that for your score.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one thing that I really love to do, actually. For I think I've done it for all of my scores so far. It really sort of encapsulates the entire concept in a really visual way. And so I like to commission a visual artist. The visual artist that did the artwork for this score, and actually has done a lot of artwork for me in the past, is called Jasmine Earl, and she's so wonderful. I usually phone her up and just throw loads of things at her, tell her what the piece is about, and she'll send me through a quick draft of what she sees, and it usually really matches up to what I've got in my head, and it's a really interesting process. And I think really helps consolidate the sounds that I've got in my head as well, and sort of really brings it all together, actually.
It's really interesting. And I look forward to seeing more of your scores, future scores, with these beautiful graphics and beautiful visual elements. I'm going to turn it to you, Grania, because we've heard this new work by Anya, and guitar repertoire, of course, is very much dear to your heart. You've written many pieces for guitar, worked with different guitarists, but of course you have played the guitar in the past, so you come to it with a fair amount of knowledge.
I wouldn't class myself now as a guitarist as such, because I went through a few grades, put it that way, and my guitar was stolen, so that ended my time taking it to a level of serious contention. And because of that, it's really helped really with anything to do with guitar or whatever, just to even have learned a certain amount and just picked up on some techniques, etc. And then all my brothers play guitar as well, so there's always been guitar has been brought out to sing or whatever else, so it was something that was always there in my childhood. The other level unfortunately didn't last too long, but it's good now at least to have a knowledge, so that when you come to it and you write, you have that experience of the feel of it, even though I'm not a performer at all, but it's still good to have that experience nonetheless.
Yeah. And kind of the flip side of that coin, Anselm, if I could come to you. I mean, you're a composer represented by CMC and a guitarist. So you were coming to Grania's work with your performer hat on, but of course, also keeping your composer hat on.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I find it, especially when playing a guitar work, difficult to distinguish between the two. And Grania's work certainly actually cultivates some of those composing skills. There's various parts in some of the movements where the player is given a little box within which to work and has to decide how exactly they're going to perform it. And I had some discussion with Grania about that, but I feel that's a moment where very much I'm figuring out how am I going to compose and how am I going to play through this particular passage, because I'm given a certain amount of freedom within which to do so.
And I suppose the interesting part that we have to talk about before we watch these wonderful recordings by Elizabeth and Anselm is that we are here on the 1st of February. We're in a fairly strict lockdown across the island of Ireland, across the world, of course. And so where Elizabeth and Anselm should be here with me in the library, performing this work socially distanced from both me and from each other, that wasn't unfortunately able to happen. So we had to do a fairly big rethink after Christmas. And with your great skill and generosity, Liz and Anselm, we have this wonderful recording that you made remotely. Liz in Dublin in her house and Anselm in Belfast in his house. How did you make that happen, Liz?
So when I came back from my holidays after Christmas, I was like, how is this going to happen? I'm going to get a call from CMC to cancel the concert. And I was absolutely delighted. I got a call to say, look, we've been looking into Jamulus and audio movers. Are you willing to try it? And I said, well, I'm not great at tech, but Jonathan Grimes in the CMC team, he really talked me through the process of how to set up Jamulus on my computer. At this point, I still didn't think it would work, but I was a very positive person. I was very willing to give it a go. And then I think it was like myself and Anselm, we both had a kind of chat on Zoom, said, well, we'll see what happens. We think it's going to work. Let's start it now. I was like, oh my gosh, we can actually hear each other and we're perfectly in sync. So I still don't actually believe it really happened, but it was just this wonderful experience. It was the first time doing chamber music with someone in nearly a year. So yeah, thank you so much to CMC for their ambition for this project, because so many other performances have still disappeared. So thank you.
Oh, I've seen a sneak preview of this video and it's absolutely beautiful. The performance that you, the chemistry and the rapport between both of you as performers. I was really surprised. I mean, it has really come across in the video, even though you're in two different places. And Anselm, talk us through a little bit, more of the setup. I mean, it was quite involved.
Yes, so we were both recording ourselves separately, but hearing each other through Jamulus, so online. And I think the thing both of us thought would be the barrier that this wouldn't get over was the latency issue of things being too far apart. So we recorded 3 of the movements from Gronya's Carlo song cycle, and we started off by working on the one which I guess was the most in a way, it's kind of antiphonal. Elizabeth makes a gesture and then I respond to that. And then, so there's some crossover, but also they're far enough apart that we felt, well, we can do this no matter how bad the latency is. And then we kind of got gradually more towards the more rhythmic movements of the piece. And we're astonished by how well they worked and how well we were able to hear each other. Yeah, I mean, for Liz, in some of the movements, though, she said actually we had each other on Zoom as well, but we were on mute. But we actually had to slightly ignore at one point the video because the video was 2 or 3 seconds behind the audio. So I would do a big chord, but actually Liz had heard it 2 or 3 seconds before.
I think everyone will be truly amazed when they watch this to how fine it really comes across, the performance and how it's worked out. And just really delighted that we were able to record these 3 movements from the Carlo song cycle. Gronya, this cycle, it's from 2018, 2019, and you worked very closely with Derek Coyle, who, like you, is based in County Carlo. I suppose the text is really arresting, the poetry and that everyone will hear sung by Liz. It's very arresting text. And Gronya, were the poems already there when you decided to set them, or did you have much discussion, collaboration with Derek on this work?
Yes, the poems were there. They were in the process of being published. So this is the book that it's come into. It's reading John Ashbery in Costa Coffee Carlo. And it's also published in Sweden. So the publisher Magnus Grin Forlag is responsible for bringing it out. And one of the actual movements that they're doing today, which is the charred boots, is in this book, and one of my favorite pieces of writing. But Derek and I, we had a good collaboration. He sent me quite a good few poems across before the book had been published. And I viewed the ones that I wanted to actually focus on. And because it was a 25-minute overall work, I decided we'd take a few of the poems and I'd set them so that we'd have 5 minutes for 6 of them. And the 3 that we hear tonight, one is they're all hashtag numbers, because it's in the spirit of John Ashbery, the poet, the American poet and surrealist poet. So he tributes the kind of writing to how surrealist poetry in John Ashbery's work, and the poems number 17. The first one they start off with is quite explosive, quite explicit. It's really sea personified and just berating us for being such bad hosts and destroying the coral reef. And it's quite an explosive language, some expletives as well used at the beginning. But it does conjure up that visceral anger that's there, that's palpable. And the Charred Boots, in comparison, is such a gentle poem, all about childhood memory. And there's such beautiful imagery, like comparing his being rare as being born kind of late to his parents, as like a Seville orange in the cold December, and such beautiful imagery. And so that's so touching. And I thought that's got to be very gentle, very kind of intimate in the way the music is treated. And the last one then, I just took a stanza from one of his poems. It's number 43, and it's just snowflakes fell in June, fast and furious, and a nightingale came next to feed from outstretched hand. So I haven't got that completely quoted properly, but that's the text generally, and that's again with a lot more space. So probably, I don't know, maybe Anselm, that was probably the easier one to tackle because of the time, that you could pull around, where the other 2 are more intricate. And certainly the Charred Boots is very much motoric. So, it's very much slow, but motoric in character. So it has to be kind of very much in sync. So that's basically it. But the collaboration was excellent. And he works in Carlow College. He teaches there. He teaches undergrads, and he has quite a lively writers group going as well there. So people are invited as well every month to take part. And he's very active, and I think really an excellent poet. And I wouldn't have found him were it not for Morgan Buckley, who did commission this, and we got introduced because of him. So I'd like to thank Morgan for that aspect. And certainly I'm so thrilled with Anselm and Liz and Anselm. It's just excellent what they've done with the piece. I'm so thrilled. And thanks to you, Yvonne, for hosting it under such difficult circumstances, and to the embassy as well. It's just a great opportunity. I'm really thrilled to be here. Yeah.
Delighted, Gráinne. Really delighted to do so. And of course, we should say that, yourself and Liz work very closely, have done so on many collaborative projects. And, it's a real treat always to hear Liz perform your work, because she has such a strong affinity with it and such expertise and knowledge of your vocal repertoire. And so, Liz, there are quite a number of Gráinne's works which are solo works for you, or for voice and electronics, or voice and tape. And I'm kind of interested, in as you said, this is the first time that you've been able to have an ensemble experience for almost a year, but you've used that time so positively and so creatively to develop your practice even more.
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me. I've done a number of collaborations this year. So Gráinne and myself have been working for most of last year on a new work called Great Women, which will be coming out this June on the Metier label. And this is a really fantastic piece Grania has written. It's celebrating the great women of the Irish, the Rising and the War of Independence. So it's Rosie Hackett and Countess Markovich, and also our first two female presidents. So it's really that widespread, the hopes for women and for the future of the Irish nation, and then for us to be now acting on what happened 100 years ago. So it's been wonderful work. It's about a 25-minute work, which we're recording shortly, so it'll be released in June. And yeah, I've just been trying to develop my practice and work with a number of different artists and composers over the time. I'm commissioning Siobhan Cleary is writing a piece for me for later on this year for myself and electronics.
Yeah, so you've been keeping busy, which is the main thing at the moment, isn't it? Creating our own routine and keeping busy. And I was interested to hear you mention that one of the pieces is focusing on Rosie Hackett, Grania, because for those of us that live in Dublin, of course, the most recent bridge that was built across the Liffey, was it maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago now, perhaps? Time just flies. But of the 22 bridges across the Liffey, I think 21, 22 bridges across the Liffey, it is the only bridge that is named after a woman. So I'm really delighted to hear that she's also included in this new work, and we look forward to that release on the Metier label. But for now, let's hear 3 movements from Grania Mulvey's A Carlow song cycle for soprano and guitar, based on poetry by Derek Coyle and performed here by Elizabeth Hilliard, soprano, and Anselm MacDonald, guitar. Movement 1, Carlow poem #17. Movement 3, The Charred Boots. And movement 6, Carlow poem #43. And the opening movement of this work contains some strong language.
The city decided to go on strike. It had finally had enough. I'm utterly pissed off with all your human balderdash. It said in a tone of beyond diluted your plastic poisons the plankton. Arise in sea temperature is bleaching the coral. It took to grow. How are we meant to work in conditions like this? And all because you bastards so fucking selfish. Enjoy mobile communications, deep shoes, and photoboard in aeroplanes, hitting burgers, will calling home ambassadors from cold river streams, the very bedrock of your lives. Batten down the hatches, there's a mighty storm a-coming. Even poem for 30 years after his death. Just like my mother, how the memory of me bond like ice through her dreams. My old boots under the bed, she never took them out. Even as each moment an answer to the last, an object from the past speaks eloquently to the present. Snowflakes fell furious in June. Snowflakes fell fast and furious that June. A nightingale flew down to feed from his outstretched hand.
The three movements from Gráinne Mulvey's A Carlow song cycle for soprano and guitar, and performed this evening for us by Elizabeth Hilliard, soprano, and Anselm MacDonald, guitar. And as we heard earlier, Anselm and Liz overcoming all the challenges of remote recording for those three movements from Gráinne's A Carlow song cycle, especially for this very special salon on the feast of St. Brigid, the first day of spring, and celebrating the first day of spring here in Ireland. And I would like to come back to you, Kathleen, as we talk about our final work for this evening, because yes, it is the first day of spring, and some snowdrops are popping through, and a few daffodils as well, hopefully on the way. And as we say here in Ireland, there is a grand stretch in the evenings compared to a month ago. And so another new work to celebrate the first day of spring, and as we look into a new year, 2021. And this work from Petra Sassi, and she's called it Oak, and it references the story of St. Brigid and her church, and her founding of her church close to a great oak tree. And Kathleen, you've also been collaborating with Petra, like you did with Anya, on the creation of this new work.
Yes, we had a few chats. It was I suppose less an interactive collaboration as with Anya, but we mainly concentrated. So Petra originally is a guitarist, so she knows the instrument well, but of course she didn't know anything about the new instrument. Actually, she didn't expect it until I showed her that it will be quite a different idiom to write for. And we mainly concentrated on this, that how this new instrument works. I think it's really interesting that somehow both commissions brought in the nature in the topic, of course, with the spring and St. Brigid's Day. And I know that Petra right now is staying in a small village in the mountains in Hungary, so between woods and nature. So I'm sure that this gave her some inspiration too. Actually, I never met her live, although we are both Hungarians. I got to know her through the Bloomsday project, which is our project coming up in June,
Yes.
because she sent excellent guitar work there, and then that is the reason that I decided to commission her for this project. And recording the piece was really challenging, um, because she used the new capo system very, very extensively. So you'll see in the recording that that I have to change positions of capos while playing fast passages. I think for me, I'm really grateful to you, Yvonne, to make this possible. So actually, not only receiving these new works, excellent works, but also that I could really try out the capacities through new music of my new guitar.
Yeah, well, it's exciting for us to hear this new instrument, Kathleen. Wonderful, and how appropriate, that on the first day of spring, we get to hear new music and a new instrument. Let's hear from Petra now. She's going to tell us a little bit about her thoughts behind the creation of this work.
Hi, my name is Petra Sassi and I'm living in Budapest, and I'm currently studying composition in Francis Academy of Music. I like to compose guitar pieces because when I was younger I was a guitarist, and that was a very unique part in my life. So I really enjoyed the process of composing this piece for Katalin Koltai. The piece entitled Oak. It's named after the Church of the Oak. And while I was writing this piece, I asked myself a question: that what happens exactly with saints while they are praying? And why saints are usually portrayed as simple people, and why we think of them as being so quiet and calm. Here we have Saint Brigid, who did all these miracles just because she loved God so much. And I think for someone who can love someone this much, the emotions must be much louder and much more extreme. I felt the traditional depiction of saints as pious individuals has grown stale. That's why I propose this piece like an alternative plea to deal with the really loud and exciting world of saints as much as we deal with the silent prayer that's clearly visible on surface. My compositional technique was rather simple, by taking a 6-note unit of 3 pitches and placing it into different context, and I assign different rhythm patterns to them and contrast these with different, more aggressive, more direct musical material to see how they can fight each other.
Petra Sassi's Oak, performed by Kathleen Coltai on her new guitar and written especially for this, the Feast of St. Brigid and Embarked, celebrating the first day of spring here in Ireland. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for the performance of that work. It's been such a joy and pleasure to speak with you all this evening, Grania, Anya, Kathleen, Anselm and Liz, and to share with you this evening in the celebration of the first day of spring, the feast day of St. Brigid. And I'm going to hand back to the ambassador, Ronan Gargan, the ambassador to Hungary. And it's been a great pleasure for us to work with the ambassador and his team on tonight's events. And the ambassador will tell us all about our spotlight event that is coming up just after the salon. Of course, there'll be lots more salons right throughout the spring here on CMC, and all the details will be on our website and through social media. Thanks for joining us, and stay with us for the CMC Spotlight.
On this Feast of St. Brigid, our celebration of the creativity of women continues with the Spotlight on Women in Music, hosted by CMC's Linda O'Shea Farron. Again, it gives me great pleasure to pass the baton to Linda, who is joined by a great panel of women active in music in Ireland and in Hungary to explore aspects of the vibrant music scenes in both countries for the next 45 minutes.
Good evening. After a long, dark winter, St. Brigid's Day celebrates the early signs of spring, and with this, the creativity and talent of women. I think it's fair to say that in 2021, more than a year in recent history, we are all looking forward to the green shoots of spring and the promise of longer, warmer days ahead. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk about women in music, to composers, performers and conductors who are at the top of their art forms and professions in Ireland, Hungary and beyond. Sadly, but inevitably, we will also be talking about barriers that women still face, barriers they have to come all along the way in order to make their enormous contributions to the arts and generally. Let me introduce you to guitarist Kathleen Coltai, composer-performer Jennifer Walsh, soprano Elizabeth Hilliard, composer-conductor Ilona Dobsai-Meshko, and conductor Sinead Hayes. Kathleen, alongside a very busy career as a professional guitarist, you are currently pursuing PhD studies in the UK while keeping up with the family spread between Hungary and the UK. Can you tell us how your PhD studies relate to your work as a guitarist and why you chose to move to the UK for these studies?
Thank you, Linda. Yes, I moved to England 1.5 years ago. Actually, it was a childhood dream to spend some time or move to England. So I'm really glad that we are here now. And my PhD research is very much based on my practical work as a musician. So it's a practice-based research. It is interesting that first I was joining another PhD of Noémi Győri, a Hungarian flutist at the Royal Academy of Music, as a collaborator. And then I realized that actually my whole work can be theoretized as a PhD research in itself. So this was the beginning. And I am working, I'm focused on expanding the guitar's idiom, the boundaries of the idiom, through innovation. This includes inventing a new guitar prototype and some extra tools, a transcription, and collaboration with composers.
Wow, so you're adding a new instrument, basically, a new guitar to the world of contemporary music.
Yes, as I even showed it in the salon. So, and also the two new pieces which I performed in this St. Brigid's event are both composed for this new guitar prototype. So this guitar prototype doesn't have a name yet. It is a testing model now, which I am performing on. It includes a transformed fretboard, and it is radically expands the idiomatic borders of the instrument. And And I call the whole now pilot project the Ligeti Guitar Project, because actually the idea came from György Ligeti's, the Hungarian composer György Ligeti's Musica Ricercata, where he was working with pitch sets. And I tried to create something similar on the guitar with special capos. So today, actually, you are hearing the very first two works for this new guitar prototype with the magnet capo system. And the name will come when the concert model is ready. I will make a call in social media to ask people what would be the best name for this new guitar.
Well, CMC will be happy to put that out on our social media, and hopefully we'll
Thank
get
you.
lots of suggestions. So Jenny, you have the unique distinction of being an elected member of both the Akademie der Künste in Germany, which is Germany's Academy of Arts, and Ireland's equivalent, which is ASTONA. Now, this is obviously after decades of very hard work, but a fantastic achievement on your part. Can you just tell me, was there any turning point in your career when you felt that you were really getting there, or the pieces of the jigsaw, if you like, were coming together? Or has it just been, you know, was there any point that you could?
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Linda. That's a difficult question to answer, because I think, like everybody, you just keep working. There certainly are projects where you feel like it was a project that got more exposure, or got more press, or you toured it more, or something like that. But I think that these, the Akademie der Künste and the ASTONA elections, they were both things that came out of the blue. I didn't know that they were coming my way. I was very honored when they came my way. But it's impossible to predict when those things can happen within the span of your career. And the most important thing is just to keep making the projects, and keep moving forward with the project. So it's a difficult one to judge. I think most composers know there's certain projects which I'm going to make a terrible pun now, they strike a chord, or they just sort of resonate. Oh, that's an even worse one. But they just sort of somehow seem to gain their own momentum. But again, some of those are very unpredictable. You might do an opera and, you pour your entire life into it for, 10 months or a year, and it's done for its run and it goes very well, but it's never seen again. But at the same time, somebody might come up to you and say, oh, I saw a really bad performance of a great piece of yours, in a venue over a pub 10 years ago, and it changed my life. So it's impossible exactly to know.
It certainly is, but that's what I was trying to get at. Was there any seminal moment where you felt, I'm really getting there now? But as you say, sometimes you feel as an artist you're getting there, but it hasn't actually caught on maybe to audiences yet. So they're two sides of the same coin.
I think so. I mean, certainly there's moments of pride when you think I can pay all my bills. Like that's probably the most seminal moment, is when you're like, yay, I can pay all my bills. But I think the other thing too, and maybe this also taps a little bit into the theme of getting women together to talk about music on St. Brigid's Day, is I certainly feel like one early work that I did, which was a an opera for Barbie dolls called XXX Live Nude Girls, and that was premiered in 2003. And then it was very interesting for me. It would have been about 2016. The piece began being performed again and again, and all of a sudden the piece had this new life. We had sort of toured it a lot between 2003 right up to around 2009, around that period. I was really happy. The piece was played a lot. It was released on DVD. And then I just was moving on. But then the sort of millennial generation picked up on the piece, and particularly in the wake of Me Too. The piece had this new life breathed into it. So I could never have predicted that would happen, and it was quite an experience when it did happen. So I think I hope to be that sort of composer that you just don't know. You don't know who will resonate with and when. You're just writing for the project.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of the art form, really. that you can go where you want to go, and then hopefully people will follow you, and it may be with a gap. But you have touched on something there when you talk about subsequent performances, because of course in the world of contemporary music there's a huge emphasis on the world premiere, and then the real point is, are we going to have subsequent performances? So that brings me neatly to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you were a member of Chamber Choir Ireland, which of course commissions lots and lots of new works and premieres them. And you also conducted many, amateur choirs along the way yourself with your own experience until late 2019, when you decided to pursue a solo career. Now, of course, you didn't know at that time that COVID-19 was around the corner. And what prompted you to take that bold step, Elizabeth?
Well, really, there were two steps. In 2016, in March, I made the decision that I was going to stop teaching. I had a split career at that point, which was really between my amateur choirs, between teaching. I had about 30 piano and voice students at the time, and also performing with Chamber Choir Ireland and some solo work. And I said, I'd really built up a lot of the solo work. I just completed a residency in Dunleary Rathdown, performing a brand new opera by Gráinne Mulvey, 45 minutes long, for Voice and Electronics, which was amazing to have that opportunity in Dunleary, in their lexicon, to work on this piece and to perform was wonderful. I thought, I want more of this in my life. I also, that summer, was about to, just linking back to Jennifer Walsh, I had contacted her in August of 2015. I said, I'd love to perform all of your music for unaccompanied vocal ensemble with my ensemble from my company, Bale, that I run with David Bremner. And she said, oh my God, that'd be amazing. It had never been performed in Ireland before. So we put this festival on in July of 2016. So in March 2016, I knew I had these things coming up, and that's what I wanted to focus on. So at that point, I stopped teaching. And it was a big change, because it meant, I think I lost €16,000 going forward. I just said, I'll find other work. I had some work lined up and I'd saved some money. And I found that because I made that decision, lots more things came in. People said, oh, she's not doing the teaching anymore. And they said, well, are you free for doing that? And I was able to take work that previously I wasn't free for. So then in 2019, I was just thinking, I want what I'm doing with my life to match in with what I want. So I want to be doing things that I feel I'm really, really good at doing. I want to do work that I really, really enjoy doing. And I want to, to make my life make sense for me. And I was absolutely loved being a member of Chamber Choir Ireland. I was a member there for maybe 15 years. I learned a lot of music. I learned a lot about music. I met a lot of really, really interesting people. But I felt for me to kind of continue on into this solo career, into conducting professionally, I had just, in October 2019, I conducted the members of Tunta Ensemble, and we put on a Dublin version of Stockhausen's Stimmung. So I felt this was the time to move on. And as you say, Linda, 2020 didn't happen the way I planned it. I had some really nice tours planned, and I had, my debut at the Great Music in Irish Houses. All of these things got postponed. But what I did learn in 2020 was I made the right choice. At no moment was I thinking, God, I wish I just had that security of the Chamber Choir Ireland contract. And I just said, no, this is the right path for me. I'm absolutely moving on the right path. And there's opportunities coming up all the time.
There certainly are, Elizabeth. You're very central to the work we do here in CMC and to many of our composers. And it's wonderful to see people taking their own careers by the neck, if you like, and to hell with what's going on with, pandemics or whatever. As Jenny said, go for it. And if you can pay the bills, hallelujah. And Ilona, this is another woman who has taken her own career by the neck and combines being both a composer and a conductor. Now, they're both separately very busy careers, Ilona. So can you tell us, what made you decide to go down both those paths together?
Why should it be surprising for a woman to be a conductor? Let me say a few words about my own story. I could only entered the Liszt Ferenc Academy of Music to study conducting because an old professor who insisted that women were not allowed finally retired. So, to avoid misunderstandings, if there are too few female conductors in Hungary, it's not because there were too few determined girls with masculine qualities, and yes, why should they need them? But because the quota for women in the last millennium was zero. How I embarked on my career as a composer is a different story. I've been composing music since I was a little girl. At the beginning, it was my grandfather who wrote it down. Then, from the age of 8, I've been able to write down the music for myself. It was clear that I was going to be a composer. This creative career is truly suitable for the involved, melancholic part of my personality. But as duality is a basic trait of my nature, the stage and the performing arts turned out to be just as important for me. These two fields make up different periods in my life. After my children were born, and now during the pandemic, if it's of course the composing work that means the contact with art for me. The busy rehearsal periods that precede an orchestral concert aren't suitable for concentrated creation.
So basically the two sides satisfy different desires for you in your career, and you've been juggling the two of them all along.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to Sinead Hayes, who's a conductor of Hard Rain Soloist Ensemble here, a major contemporary music ensemble here on the island of Ireland. And Sinead came to conducting through structural engineering, which is obviously a rather different route. And Sinead, can you walk us briefly through the steps from sort of hard hat to baton?
Well, thanks, Linda. It's lovely to be here with this amazing group of women. I have to say, it's fantastic. And listening to your story, Ilona, I can't believe that one person stood in the way of women conductors in Hungary. That's an unbelievable statistic. I was lucky in many ways because I suppose I had done music as a child. I had, studied in the Royal Irish Academy on a scholarship, come up through the ranks, but had never really seen a future as a professional musician, certainly coming from the west of Ireland. There was no real role models. So I decided to do engineering, did my degree in civil engineering at NUIG, and then got a scholarship to study structural steel design in Imperial College in London. And when I got to London, it was like the whole world opened up to me, and I was playing in orchestras every night on the violin. It was amazing. And I started to look at the conductors and I started to think, I think I could do that. And so I found an evening course in conducting, and I stood in front of an orchestra. I was 27, and I remember distinctly, it was a beautiful sunny afternoon. The sun was shining, the choirs, the celestial choirs were singing overhead, and a switch flicked, and I had found something connected. So from then on, I just kind of made it my mission to transition into conducting. I left my engineering job, went back, did my music degree in City University, had 3 amazing years of violin lessons in Guildhall with this amazing teacher called Gerhard Schmidt, who used to play in the Vienna Philharmonic. And so when I hadn't practiced, my questions were about all the amazing conductors he had played for in the Vienna Philharmonic. So it was fantastic. And then I won a place in the Masters in the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, the Masters in Conducting. And yeah, I did my last bit of engineering in the summer of 2008, and I saved enough money to get me through the whole year in the Royal Northern, and from then on I worked as a professional conductor. So I've been very, very lucky. Going back to your story, Ilona, if someone hadn't given me the opportunity to study, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. There's no question. With all the enthusiasm in the world, you need the training. You need to learn how to do it. And so I was very, very lucky in the teachers I had, and I was always kind of veering towards, contemporary music, and always, I suppose that the engineering brain was kind of really useful, giving you a toolkit to kind of, solve all the problems. But there was that musical, that artistic side that had been slightly suppressed, I think, by the engineering that came out. And so it's amazing to explore the two sides, a little bit like yourself. The kind of duality of the whole thing is really important. So it's been amazing, and I just feel so lucky going back to what Jenny said about paying the bills, to be able to pay the bills with music, it is a privilege. And
isn't it? That
it is, yeah.
It boils down all this creativity and talent in women. And, you know, my own background is as a lawyer. I've been a lawyer my whole career before entering contemporary music, so a similar unusual route. But it's the same thing, you know, in the legal profession. It's a very male-dominated profession still, despite the fact of the number of women who practice. All the partners are men. So, Jenny, I'm going to get into a little bit of your career, because clearly we have an overview now of everybody. But Jenny, one of the things that's, you know, you're particularly well known for is that you are an integral part of the performances of many, not all obviously, but many of your own works. And was there anything in particular that prompted you to do this, or was that just a natural progression, or is that just how you do your own work?
I think it's interesting to me that it's considered notable within new music when the composer is involved in the performances. Because the history of certainly Western classical music has a lot of composers heavily involved in disseminating the work, you know, especially like in early periods or like the Baroque, the composer was often playing the work or directing the rehearsals. But you know, and certainly in Ireland, in trad and in folk, of course, you would be involved in performances. And as somebody who's like a lifelong pop music fan, you know, it's not notable that Prince plays his own music, you know, as well as writes songs for other people. It's just a more, and I suppose for me, it's just a vision of musicianship where you're doing all the different things. So when Sinead is talking about taking violin lessons as well as being the conductor, you know, I spent a lot of formative years playing in the Irish Youth Orchestra, which gave me the best orchestration lessons that I could hope for. You know, I said because I was a trumpet player, so I sat at the back and could see everything that was happening. So I certainly think that's just a normal way of functioning. And to me, it's very life-giving, if that makes sense, in that I get together with other people and we play music. I do a lot of free improvisation as well. And if you're doing that regularly, you're learning about sound all the time, how it behaves in space, how you describe it to people, how you shape it. So that's just sort of part of how I function, I suppose.
Well, I agree with you 100%, Jenny. And it's the reason I'm asking the question is that it has kind of struck me as strange since I've come into this role, because you know, the legal profession is split into solicitors and barristers, and they have different jobs to do. But certainly with contemporary music, I know that, you know, composers like Rachmaninoff often composed for his own actual fingers, and he had huge hands, and it was hard for people to play the works he composed because he actually composed for his own 10 fingers. And it has struck me, and I wondered whether it was the kind of professionalization of performance, that in order now to be able to call yourself, you know, a soprano or a guitarist or whatever, you have to nearly have the PhD in it. And then you have to have the PhD in composition, and you have to have PhD in musicality, and you have to in musicology rather. And has it split up the profession of composition and taking the composer out of his or her own work?
Well, I my sort of read on it is that it's a specifically Western art music phenomenon, because if you look at folk musics, you don't split people up like that. You don't say, you would never have a folk music school where you said, well, these people sit in a room alone and write the tunes, you know, and these other people sit in a pub alone and play the tunes on the squeeze box. Like, that's ludicrous that you would split those things. And I think it's something that's a specific phenomenon. It's embedded institutionally in all of the educational systems. It's embedded in the way that degrees are organized. So it's difficult often for performers who are interested in composing to actually get access to composition lessons because of how their degrees are structured. There's hierarchy. Having friends who are both solicitors and barristers, I understand the hierarchical nature and the views of some of them. And I think that it's, I don't teach like that. I teach in a way that my sort of attitude is anybody is a performer and anybody's a composer. Just make the stuff and perform it. So I do think that it's something which I'm curious what conservatoires 10, 20, 50 years from now will look like. because they're really sort of, a lot of them are very much encased in amber, and the music that's taught and the music that's programmed and the music that the students play for their exams is the same as it was 30 to 50 years ago. And I'm curious about how, I think that's one of the sites that we can make real institutional change. And those of us who are privileged enough to have jobs within those sort of structures can try and make change. Because when I go and I see that the brass department are playing the exact same repertoire that, you know, my fellow brass students played 25 years ago, with no thought over the fact that every piece is written usually by a Caucasian deceased male, then you think like this is completely out of step with what is happening in art schools. It's completely out of step with what's happening in society. So I think those structures, we have to think about ways to change them.
I think we do, certainly, and certainly contemporary music is chomping at the bit to tell the rest of the world about that. And Ilona, I know that, you know, when you talked about, obviously, you know, difficulties in becoming a conductor, I suppose you were really touching on the concept of social construct, you know, where a concept is not naturally occurring, but rather it's given meaning by humans and is then accepted as fact. And I'm just wondering whether you can expand on that in terms of your work as a composer as well. Have you had these difficulties of social construct as a composer as well as a conductor?
First, today there is no need for a woman to bring 10 children into this world to have 2 who reach adulthood and come back from the war, yeah? It's clear that back in history, women were or had to be held back for this purpose. But these days, apart possibly for a few years break when they have small children, women can have about 40 years left to do what they are good at. Then concerning physical strength, in our mechanized world, men's physical strength is not a priority need anymore. In any event, being a nurse working night shifts is physically draining, but this is socially acceptable as a job for women alongside raising children. Whereas owning your own business is feminism. And why is that? Only in the past 100 years or so, women have been allowed to pursue careers in medicine, as well as nursing, which is the same grueling hospital environment. Were women less capable 100 years ago? Likewise, being a cleaning lady is physically draining, but again, this is socially acceptable as a job for women alongside raising children. Whereas being on stage is feminism, and about the choice of creative careers. I think concerning our occupation, we are most worthy in our human existence if we all give the world what we are most talented at and happiest doing. So why should it be a trade-off between our chosen profession and family life, especially if the trade-off is only for women? In my experience, both as a composer and a conductor, if a woman has a creative career, she often needs to give explanations. Women in creative careers are often said to be seeking self-fulfillment, said so with a critical undertone, just because their entire being, is involved in their work. On the other hand, working hard day and night for little money while taking care of the family is a socially accepted, ordinary life for a woman.
Interesting that we have to have this conversation in 2021, but it is permeates society. Cataline, you have chosen guitar as your instrument, and let's say, in terms of composition here in Ireland anyway, a lot of the composers for guitar are men, and they often perform their own works. And I know we try to, so events like this, to highlight these instruments and bring women into them. I know Jenny played the trumpet when she was younger, and that's another sort of instrument that often is played by men. Have you found any difficulties in sort of navigating your career in that in guitar, professional guitar?
Well, I think there is a stereotype of the guitar as being a masculine instrument somewhere. I would say it's global view, although the guitar's intimate and introverted and very sensitive nature doesn't explain that at all. But still, there is an opinion, a very strong opinion of expecting guitarists to be men. In my homeland, Hungary, I cannot deny that I did struggle with this whole concept. As a guitarist, my experience is actually that it really differs in different kind of groups. So there are musical groups which are more open and not bringing any gender issues in Eastern Europe, where there are other groups who are bringing. So I have very good and very bad experiences too in my home country. I think it very much depends on the opinion leaders of certain groups. So in case of Hungarian guitar community, all the opinion leaders are men, and the way they formed the mainstream is that it is not very much accepting women on stage, accepting women guitarists being teachers, but not as performers. So nevertheless, I know many excellent, super talented Hungarian women guitarists. Most of them are unfortunately not on stage and were forced to go on a teaching career only. And I have very different experiences here in England or Ireland or the United States. I think these concepts are more or mostly belonging to the past, really, or like in the mainstream dialogue, I am not meeting any of these discriminative concepts.
That's good news. But it does bring me to another area, which is, the choral. And it's interesting, I always notice that a lot of choral conductors are women, certainly in Ireland. That may not be the case internationally, but it's almost universally the case. But then when it comes to conducting orchestras, that's less so the case. It's also less so the case when you have adjudication panels for choral competitions. So, maybe Elizabeth, you could talk a little bit about sort of your experience of the choral world versus the orchestral world.
Yes, so I started off as an orchestral musician. That was going to be my path. And I don't believe I was ever conducted by a female conductor as an orchestral musician. I also, similar to Jenny, I played in the Irish Youth Orchestra, which was amazing. I feel I sang in Chamber Choir Ireland from 2004 until 2019 as a full-time member. And in that time, while you speak about how most choral conductors are female, in that time, the artistic director, there was time, and there was also a previous artistic director, and all three were men. I believe we were conducted, there must have been so many guest conductors. I must have worked with maybe 30 guest conductors over that time, possibly more. And I think 3 are female. So we worked with Orla Flanagan. We worked with Odeline de Martinez. I hope that's her name. And also the new conductor of the BBC Singers, the new artistic director, Sophie. I'm really apologize, so Sophie, I cannot remember your surname, but perhaps it can go later on. And I feel that is more of a strange thing when you say that there's so many female conductors working in Ireland, working abroad in the choral field, that yet they're still to make their mark in the professional arena.
Yes, so Sinead, you obviously are making your mark in the professional arena as a conductor. And I'm just wondering, as an experience for you, do you ever have to take your hard hat out and as a conductor as well? Don it?
Well, I think a hard head definitely is probably quite a useful thing for a conductor to have. But yeah, it's interesting, you know, what Catalin was saying and what Liz was saying, you know, the opinion makers are men and the gatekeepers are men. And if you look at, you know, how guest conductors and how conductors are actually invited, it's a process. It comes from the top. A name is put forward, you check the availability. But if that name is not a female conductor, or if those names are not diverse, then those people never get invited and you don't get the opportunities. Now, I was very, very lucky. I remember I did an audition with the RTE Concert Orchestra in 2012, and that was just after me sending in a CV, and that's how I got started really in Ireland. It was just me sending a CV and one person deciding, yes, we'll give her a chance to audition. But I wonder how many other people didn't get that chance and who don't get that chance on a continual basis. So it's really about the gatekeepers. It's really about, you know, encouraging diversity and making sure that people get a chance. And, you know, conducting is one of these things, it takes time. And you might not be where you want to be when you start out, but 5 years later you might be in a completely different place. But if the opinion has been decided, well, no, we don't want to see her again, that's not fair. It's like we don't get the instrument until we get the instrument in front of us. So you can't learn your craft without the experience. And it's a chicken and egg thing. If you're not getting the experience, you're not going to progress. It's just that simple. And I'm incredibly lucky with Hard Rain that, you know, I get to work with this world class, and they are a world class group of contemporary musicians who are just amazing. And we have a way of working that is, you know, artistically, musically, technically, really, really fulfilling and really, really amazing. But I just think in Ireland, we do need a bit of a shake-up in terms of the diversity of conductors we're seeing on our podiums. That's what I would say.
That's very important for composers as well, to know that, let's say you're a woman conductor, you happen to be a woman. Do you think that makes any difference in terms of your choice of works that are composed by women or men? Are you more conscious? Are you gender blind? And more importantly, when it comes to conducting large-scale works by women?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I try to be gender blind. I'll try to be gender biased when I'm picking a work, and if it's quality, I mean, it's all about quality. It has to be technically, you know, able to go. You can't be wasted. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
We're not talking about lack of quality, but we're talking about with that obvious, you know, assumption.
Yeah, I do try. I mean, it's really difficult to find things that, you know, will work for a program. So if you're programming something, it's really difficult to bring a 30-minute work by a contemporary composer to an orchestra the first time you go. What you want is a 7-minute work that fits in with smaller orchestral forces, that doesn't need you to hire 5 extra percussionists and, you know, 2 pianos and five harps. What you want is something that's easy to program, it's easy to sell to an orchestra. And I had this, you know, even with the RTE Concert Orchestra, I tried to sell them about 3 different contemporary pieces to do in a lunchtime concert, and it just wouldn't fly because I didn't have a recording. The works were slightly too long. The instrumentation didn't quite match. So it's what I would love to have, you know, 20 pieces that I could say, I know this one works. I know it'll come together in half an hour rehearsal with an orchestra, because you've got to think about rehearsal time and you know, how is it going to come together? And then you just don't want to just play the notes. You want it to be musically excellent as well as everything else. You have to get beyond just, we'll get through it. You know, you want it to get under the skin of the players. So I think that's the biggest.
It's about having a body of works available there.
Absolutely.
Not just the odd one popping up here and there.
Yeah.
And that's the same in any profession or any walk of life where choices have to be made. The selection has to be there in the first place. So Ilona, in terms of people at the helm of festivals, because that's another thing. Programming, if the works are there, the canon of works are there, then it comes down to programming. What about heads of festivals or, people in management in Hungary?
Sadly, that's a similar story. If we take a look at the leadership roles in Hungary, we find that the National Theatre in Hungary has never had a female director in the 185 years of its history. The Hungarian State Opera has never had a female director in the 136 years of its history. And let's see the politics. Hungary has only had 15 female ministers until now, ever, altogether. But fortunately, there are some areas where gender equality is at more advanced stage. In the cultural scene, women rank among the managers, agents, and directors in festivals and art management.
So, what about you, Elizabeth? What's been your experience of programming in festivals?
So I've been involved in a few different festivals. The first festival that I was involved in was my own festival, Bale Festival. We ran our first festival in 2010. And we had a meeting with Michael Dervin. We were recommended to go and meet him. And one of his first comments was, looking at our press release, it's 50-50 male, female. We had a number of people highlighted in bold. And he just said, it's so unusual. And we just looked at him and he said, sure, the world is 50-50 male, female. There's nothing surprising about this. And he said, you should really make it a big thing about it. We decided not to. It was just one of those things that we thought it was normal. The next festival I was involved in was the Hilltown New Music Festival, which was really, really wonderful. It was run by David Stalling and Anthony Kelly, and they put together this wonderful array of music. And it was generally, I couldn't give you what the gender balance was, but there was some really, really, really interesting female composers that were there. It was the first time I actually saw Jennifer Walsh perform live. There was music by Karen Power, and there was some wonderful, and it was a huge array of music. It wasn't just having to be, I think Sinead was talking about the gatekeepers, where it's decided what the type of music that an audience wants to listen to is. Whereas in the Hilltown Festival, it was just a vast array of sound art, of composed music, installations, and it really opened my mind up to the huge amount of possibilities. More recently, I've been involved with, I'm going to be performing on the 8th of March with the Finding a Voice Festival in Clonmel, which was set up 3 years ago to feature solely the music of female composers, because I think their mission is that really there has to be a platform for female composers, or composers, as you say, that happen to be women, because there aren't so many performances of music by composers that are women, and I think that's a wonderful festival here in Dublin, here in Ireland. It's in Clonmel.
There's no question about it. We are attempting in a short space of time to tackle a massive topic. And nobody's pretending that we're going to get to the heart of it or anything, but it is interesting to just have some, sort of insights from people who, like the panel here today, who have such vast experience over such a long period of time. And you mentioned audiences there, Elizabeth, and that's something I wanted to touch on too with Kathleen, because as a performer and a soloist, guitarist, and in the end of the day, Jenny talked about paying the bills, and we're all talking about PhDs, and we talked about having families. So what about building new and broader audiences for contemporary music? Kathleen, have you any sort of wild and crazy suggestions what we could do during COVID? Take advantage.
Yeah, well, of course, this is a huge topic which could have another huge panel talk as in itself. But personally, I really believe in dialogue as a concept to contemporary music. I feel that one of the main concerns when it comes to audience, that there is a certain type of alienation of the genre, and many groups of audiences feel that they are disconnected from the whole genre, and they are kind of, I don't understand contemporary music position because I am like not enough trained, not enough educated. I don't recognize. So there are all kind of concerns about education, which is of course brings a lot of topics in, like elitism, snobism, niche, style, and all kind of things which can be quite problematic, and I don't think we have space here to discuss. But in my personal choice, I am aiming for creating a dialogue with the audience. So I think if performers, composers can show that they are real persons, they have a face, like this talk here, that we are here, we what we feel about it, what our personal opinion about it, how does it connect to us, then if we can show this to the audience, then they can feel better connected to it. So in my career, I was project leading several contemporary music series for young people, and I was always trying to engage them to a dialogue in diverse forms. So that's my path.
I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there, I think, Katalin, because I mean, certainly when I was growing up, classical music and opera were considered something you needed to know something about before you could listen to them. You could go into a gallery and look at a painting on a wall, and you weren't supposed to have to know anything about it except what your eyes showed you. But somehow your ears had to be better educated for classical music. And Jenny said this earlier on when she was talking about traditional music and how it was a strange thing that in contemporary music, that it was notable that, that composers would be an integral part of their own works. So, as you know, Jenny, one of the things that I am always fascinated by your alter ego works, like Group Pat, and is that a way for building audiences in a way where it's using the imagination of people?
To be honest, with the working with alter egos, for me, I wasn't thinking about building audiences. I was thinking about getting away from the sort of the system of strictures within new music. And so, I mean, when I did the Group App project, I had 9 different alter egos from that. 4 men, 4 women, and 1 drag queen. And what I found was quite interesting was, if I can put it this way, Sinead is talking about how, orchestras are trying to figure out how to do programming, and they're trying to figure out that there's a lot more that goes on than just, is the piece good? There's also, can we rehearse it in half an hour? Does it require 5 extra percussionists or something like that? So I was interested in sort of how some of these decisions are made, why people choose one piece or say they like a composer over another. And by working with these alter egos, what was fascinating to me was that I would do a concert where I would do 4 or 5 pieces ostensibly by 5 different people, and then people would come up and they'd say things that were vaguely sexist, vaguely racist, about the composers, because they didn't think they were talking about me. They thought they were talking about the composers on the program. And you suddenly realize, there's a whole lot of bias in here. Like, there's a reason why, if you work for Microsoft, they make you do implicit bias training because like the entire culture has sort of biased people to sort of at times be sexist, be racist, be transphobic, be homophobic, And so with the working with the alter egos, it was a way to sort of play with that aesthetically and also socially, because I could write a piece in an aesthetic which seemed completely opposed to the next alter ego's aesthetic, and then people would talk about them in a more free way. The other thing too was that for me, once you saw that you were working under a different name, you realized people treated the work in a different way. And so there is one thing I would say that I sort of, in terms of our efforts to move towards more diversity in programming, is that I think that we have this fallacy that all of music programming has been based exclusively on quality. So in my lifetime I've seen a whole lot of terrible music. So the idea that like all we've ever done is look for the highest quality pieces and program them is total rubbish. Do you know what I mean? A lot of pieces are programmed because of nepotism, because like it's a flute and electronics gig and they need like 1 5-minute piece to fill out the program because the programmer's saying, please, it has to go for an hour. Like there's a huge amount of reasons why pieces get programmed, which has nothing to do with quality. And so I think that with the Group Out project, I didn't realize how much of a side effect it would be to sort of see these things, or hear these comments from people. But it sort of drove those issues home for me in a way that no amount of sociological papers could.
Well, that's a perfect wrap for me because I'm really interested in your alter egos, and I would just like to say thank you to everybody. In this evening's CMC Salon, CMC and the Embassy of Ireland Hungary are delighted to have featured the world premiere performances of 2 new pieces of music written specially for this celebration of St. Brigid's Day 2021 by composers Anya Mallon from Ireland and Petra Sassi from Hungary, with both works written for and performed by Kathleen Koltai. It was also a great joy to hear excerpts from Gráinne Mulvey's A Carlow Song Cycle, performed by soprano Elizabeth Hilliard and guitarist Anselm MacDonald, both of whom had to overcome all of the challenges of recording remotely with great skill and commitment. Thank you also to all the panelists in this evening's CMC Spotlight, sharing their insights and experiences and providing a very stimulating discussion on women in music in Ireland and in Hungary. Thank you, Ilona Dubsai-Meshko, Sinead Hayes, Elizabeth Hilliard, Kathleen Koltai and Jennifer Walsh. And now all that remains for me to do is, on behalf of the Contemporary Music Centre, here at Handel's Arch, where Handel's Messiah was first performed in April 1742, and from the Embassy of Ireland in Budapest, to thank you all for attending this event and wish you a happy St. Brigid's Day from all of us. And we look forward to our continued partnership for Bloomsday in June 2021, when Kathleen Koltai will be leading the way with us again. And thank you all very, very much.